Good evening, dear friends. It's 7 p.m. and as usual, we start our meeting of every second Monday of each month of the year with we have our English public meeting in English, where we have all the activities of the night in English, be it the prayer, the announcements, the inspirational message, which will be brought to us by Nancy today, and the main topic of the night, also in English, by Hendrick. And we usually start with a prayer so that we can connect even deeper with the good spirits that are always surrounding us and inviting us to the good reflections of the gospel and of the messages brought to us by the same good spirits that we are always looking to learn from them. So with that being said, let's do our initial prayer just by focusing our heart and our good energies towards our Father, our Creator, and saying, Dear God, Creator of the universe and of our small hearts, we would like to thank you for the blessing of being alive in this time, in this period of our history where we are facing all the challenges of a planet going through so many transformations. We would like to ask you that you open our hearts and our minds so that we can understand that any and everything that we get from the world is for our own good. So may we be able to understand your laws and be able to accept whatever comes to us, raising our heads, shaking up the dust, and keep going forward towards your light, towards your love. May the good spirits that surround us, and may our dear Master and Lord Jesus bless us with this love that we still don't understand, but that we know that embraces us at all times. May your love and your grace be with us now and always. So be it. So, let's invite Nancy so that she can read the message of the night from the book Our Daily Bread and give us a little insight on what the message says.
Good evening, everyone. The message is from the book Our Daily Bread, Francisco Cândido Xavier, by the Spirit of Emmanuel. And it's number 99, and the title is With Ardent Love. Above all, love each other deeply. It is in Peter 4:8. It is not enough to proclaim virtue in favor of the establishment of the divine kingdom among mankind. Problem extensively debated equals solution much delayed. let us individually listen to the apostolic warning and swell with ardent charity one for all. To speak well, to teach with certainty, and to believe sincerely are the primary phases of the service. It is crucial to work, to create, and to feel with the Christ. Fraternity, simply suggested to others, builds brilliant facades that experience can consume in 1 minute. It is imperative to achieve the substance, the essence. Let us be understanding with those who are ignorant, vigilant in relation to those who have gone astray in evil and in the shadows, patient toward those who are ill, serene toward the irritated, and above all, let us manifest goodwill toward all those who the Master entrusted to us for the daily teachings. Prompted reasoning, being well prepared to act with agility on earth, can constitute a valuable patrimony. On the other hand, if the heart is lacking in feeling for the problems, in conducting and resolving them for the common good, he will be susceptible to being easily converted into a calculator. Let us not be detained in theoretic compassion. Let us seek fraternal love, spontaneous, ardent, and pure. Heavenly charity not only scatters benefits, it also radiates the divine light. Well, this message talks by itself and starts, the title is With Ardent Love, and comes to talk about charity. And to me, it doesn't talk just simply charity. The one is not talking about the one if we just take some money and give to somebody else, or if we take some clothes from our closet and give to Salvation Army or whatever. I'm not saying this is not a charity, but I'm saying is this message doesn't talk about this kind of charity. It talks about something deeply in love, and it says, what about the real charity? Is saying that kind of you have to feel inside you before do something to anybody. And if we pay attention in our lives every day, any single day in our routine, we have many opportunities and chances to do something to anybody. Sometimes there is a person beside you, and if you just smile to her or to him, it will be a great thing. And it says that we have to think about charity in more deeply way, a larger way, and see it comes with solidarity, faith, love, and compassion. And in the end, it says, let us not be detained in theoretic compassion, because charity is action. And also, it says, and another phrase, it says, let us seek fraternal love. It comes to remember us that we are brothers and sisters. And it says, be spontaneous, ardent, and pure. So it's talking about pure love. And the Spiritist doctrine says, out of charity there is no salvation. And I think this message is not for the beginners, it's to us to remind us that the church needs to come from our hearts and with love. Thank you very much, and let's ask to Hendrick for tonight's lecture.
Good evening. Thank you, Nancy. Tonight we're continuing our study of the Gospel according to Spiritism, and it's always interesting to get these assignments to study these topics here with you all, because it makes us read texts that we've read before. It makes us study things that a topic that we've certainly studied before, but every time you are compelled to study again, we kind of see the messages slightly different, maybe because it's a different time in our lives, or different experiences that we have gone through. And so there's always something new to take from these moments, and it's always very nice to sit and study these topics, and try to prepare something cohesive and hopefully meaningful and helpful to everyone. So tonight we're talking about motives for resignation. It's items number 12 and 13 of chapter 5 of the Gospel according to Spiritism. As I think I pointed out earlier when we started chapter 5, this is by far the longest chapter in the book, maybe except for the final one where there's prayers. But as we are introducing the moral aspects of the Spiritist doctrine through the Gospel according to Spiritism, we have arrived at chapter 5, where we start. That's titled "Blessed Are the Afflicted," and just so I can go back to the beginning of this chapter to say that, to read the passage from the Bible that starts this chapter. Jesus says in Matthew, Jesus talks about in Matthew 5, chapter items 4, 6, and 10. It says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." And then in Luke, he says, "Then he looked up at his disciples and said, Blessed are you who are poor, for the kingdom of God belongs to you. Blessed are you who hunger now, for you will be satisfied. Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh." So this is the chapter on our afflictions, and we've talked about justice of afflictions and present causes of present day and past causes of afflictions, and forgetfulness of the past as part of helping us to deal with our afflictions. And now we get to motives for resignation, as I said, where we need to go back a little bit to sort of tie this whole thinking or understanding of suffering and how to deal with it, and how how God expects of us this act of resignation, and we'll get to it. Sometimes it's a word that gets confused with being stagnant or being accepting of everything and of giving up. But that's not what we're going to see, of course. So just as a quick reminder, chapter 3 is where we talk about in my Father's house there are many mansions. And we introduced the idea, or the spirits introduced the idea, or the explanations of the different kinds of worlds that are populated by spirits out in the universe, and they classified the different worlds according to a simple 5-stage 5 stages of evolution. Of course, there's in between. There's different worlds will be at different levels or in sort of transitions from one level to another. But one thing that's important for us to understand is that in this world that we're in is still what we call the world of trials and atonements. And essentially what that means is this is a world where there is suffering. There will be suffering. We are all, if we're here in this world, if we have incarnated here, that means we're susceptible to suffering, and we're probably all have suffered or suffer one thing or another in our lives. So it's, that's in the nature of where we are, of, the spirits that are around us. We are all here in this earth, following this living this incarnation, and we've come back here, to either perform trials or expiations or atonements, right? We either have to show that we are deserving of, or more deserving of God's love, and that we have learned our lessons, or we are here sometimes to pay for some of the things that we have done in the past. And whether we've done them in the past in this life or in the previous life, as chapter 4 talked about. We talked about reincarnation, I believe, in chapter 4. It's important to understand those concepts as we get to understanding suffering and understanding the justice, how God can be just, how God can be all just, all fair, all good, even though we look around the world and we see deep poverty, and we see kids going hungry while other kids are throwing food away, where we see different versions. We see different people suffering for different things, and people under the same conditions, some suffering, some feeling that suffering, others not. And there's all of this gamut of experiences that we all have. Children that are born, without, with an extra chromosome. Children that are born with autism. Children that are born without an arm, or deaf, mute, etc. And and we look at that, and how can we accept God's justice if we don't understand, or if we don't accept past experiences as the cause and explanation for some of these ailments, some of these sufferings that these people have. And then we look at people who can be well off. They are born in good families, or born in loving families, or born in rich families, or born in good countries, first world countries, or and yet you go look at their lives more deeply, and sometimes they're suffering, even though it's not physical pain. as we see out there, their suffering is sometimes just as real, sometimes more real, or deeper than those people who are not as well off as they are, because they have psychological issues, or they're not content with their lives, or people around them are full of envy and jealousy, and their lives are just suffering one day after the next. And our world being this world of trials and atonements, per the description in chapter 3, we know that evil still prevails in this world, and I think we can see that in the news. We can see that in in the more recent history, whether it was this year, 10 years, 100 years, all of the man-made problems that all the wars that we have seen, and all of the hatred that people have, and towards one another, and that fits with the description of a world where there is good. Obviously, there is a lot of good, and sometimes when we look at the news, we tend to see a lot of bad things. Of course, there's a lot of good things, and and this is our objectives as human beings, as spirits, is obviously to progress and to get better and to make the world a better place. So eventually, it does get better, and but it's a slow process, right? It doesn't take one life. It doesn't take one generation, a couple of generations. It takes a long time to correct all of the issues that, all of the evils that have existed in our lives. So, all of that sort of explains how and why we have so much suffering in this world. So the only way that there can be this much suffering is if we think about it. It's this world is not a world where the lack of a better word, this is not a place where angels live, right? There's a lot of us non-angels around here, and there's a lot to be done. But as we think about suffering, there's a couple of ways that we can deal with it. There's two very distinct ways that we can ourselves look at suffering, or our suffering, or the suffering of others in general, and so how do we deal with it, right? I think if there's two clear ways, and I'm basing this also of some I read obviously the Gospel According to Spiritism, but also some stuff by Hao Teixeira that gives us some ideas to discuss tonight. And he talks about, when we look at suffering, we have two choices. We can try to understand it. We can try to understand why we live in this world, why there's suffering in this world, why why everything around us is how it is. Or we can ignore all that and be lost in despair and revolt, because my suffering, why am I suffering? Why is God being so mean to me? Why doesn't God ever give me an opportunity that somebody else has? Why is my life the worst, et cetera, et cetera? And and clearly that second path of looking at suffering as and being in despair and being in revolt with God and with the world because of our suffering, clearly I think shows itself as not the smart option. It's I talk about I talk about this with my son once sometimes. It's like when you Like when playing sports and you miss something that you were sure, you miss a ball that you shouldn't have missed, or you do something, and you expected better of yourself, and you can fall down and feel sorry for yourself, and you can complain about it and try to blame, oh, the wind kicked the ball out, or and I'm using simple examples just to show how the attitude actually exists in every level of our lives. And I use that a lot because obviously he likes to play sports. But you have the option to feel sorry for yourself while everybody else is still playing, or you can get up and go back and try again and work on it, and and say, okay, well, that wasn't very good. I'll accept that, but I'll try it again. And so this idea of giving in to a feeling of revolt or a feeling of despair because of that suffering or whatever negative that happens in our lives really takes us nowhere. It does end up leading lots of people into depression, sometimes into the sort of more darker places mentally, psychologically, that one can get into. So instead, if we understand, or if we try to understand how this justice of God, how this suffering belongs in this world, and if we are part of this world, how it belongs with us or around us, it will help us not necessarily have less suffering, but suffering less, right? We may be able to, still go through the same things, but feel less, or work better, and take that suffering or that opportunity to learn and make ourselves better and make others better around us. And we see this in examples in real life quite a bit, right? We look at, for example, the parents, the mothers especially, of children that have died in school shootings, for example. You go look at them, and they are mobilizing their community and those around them, and their state sometimes, and mobilizing their politicians to do better, to help solve and resolve this problem so that somebody else doesn't go through that suffering. Does that make her suffer less because she as she's working through this, is it less painful that she lost her son or her daughter in a shooting? Not really, right? But she is taking that power in turning that anger or that despair into something positive, because you wake up and once you've gone through something that traumatic, you can be lost in there forever, or you can say, this is not something anybody else deserves to feel like, so I got to do something about this, right? And so, it's what we do with it, right? So, as I said before, there's we tend to look at our lives, and we tend to look at the lives of others in such a different way. We'll look at somebody who's famous or beautiful or rich, and we'll look at them and say, wow, I wish I had that luck. I wish I was that fortunate. I wish that had worked out for me that way. And we don't really take into consideration everything we don't know about that person. We don't know, how they're feeling or what they're going through, right? sometimes they'll be going through a lot of difficulty. And then, when we talk about this, and then, the other side of the story is too, sometimes we look at them and say, well, they're too perfect, and our envy, our jealousy starts speaking and say, oh, there's, she must have all kinds of trouble at home, or she must, she's married to Tom Brady, the guy is the best, she must have to suffer through waiting for him to get home every night, or something like that. You kind of, but we tend to we try to improve our suffering by thinking that others suffer more, right? And then therefore, with our envy, we try to make ourselves feel good. And of course, that also doesn't help, right? I mean, how am I going to feel better by acting envious or jealous of somebody else? In the end, all I'm doing is wasting my time and really not resolving anybody's problem, right? Especially my own. Anyways, so we look at all of this and we say, okay, why is it exactly that we've come to carry, as he says here, carry marks of this evil that prevails on earth? Why do we have these marks? Why, bless you, why is it that we are still under these things that seem to happen only to me? Why do they still happen? Why do they happen only to me? And really, as we learn to understand Spiritism, as we read and we start to think about the justice of God through the natural laws of reincarnation, for example, we start seeing that that these are marks that we are likely carrying from the past, and so all of this just means that I am in this world where I need to be. And going back to the text that the item that we're studying tonight, going back to the actual text from Kardec, is interesting to see his thought process and his explanation to give us motives for resignation, right? So that's what we are trying, as we try to understand, as we better have a better grasp on the things that make us suffer and the reasons why we suffer in this world, and as we start to understand the things that we carry from our own experiences and our own past lives, we start to understand why there's so much going on that we initially can't explain. So this was actually a very good read, and I would suggest everyone to take their time and read this section again. But I wanted to point out a few things, and I made a lot of marks, but I'm going to read it hopefully just a few things here. First of all, he says, with the words, "Blessed are the afflicted, for they shall be consoled," Jesus indicates a compensation which awaits those who suffer in the resignation which leads man to bless suffering as a prelude to the cure. So when we look, again, thinking of what the objectives of our lives in this world are, if we are in this planet, we either have trials to go through, we have atonements to sort of, I guess I don't like to use the word, but to sort of pay for what we've done, right? Or you know, go through some of the suffering that we've made to others in a means that we can learn from that suffering and become, and continue in our evolution, right? So he invites us to think of this suffering as a prelude to the cure, as what comes before our the cure of our affliction is the understanding, the acceptance, the resignation of this suffering, and allowing ourselves to not to suffer without a reason necessarily, but understanding that the suffering is a means to achieving something more. And so he says these words, and these are Jesus' words, can also be understood in this way. One should be content to suffer, seeing that the pain of this world is the payment for past debts. All right, so if we are here, that means in our past, or in our current condition, we have done certain, committed certain acts or certain trespasses against others that put us in this condition to work, with the people around us, and to be in this world as a means to sort of pay the debts that we have incurred by how we've treated others in the past, right? But one of the when we study reincarnation and the pains of being here, we start to understand that our ability to go through some of these trials in one life, or in the life that we find ourselves in, is a way to actually to pay our debts faster, quicker. So he actually, bless you. So he actually suggests, he tells this little story, saying a man who suffers, or a person who suffers, is like somebody who owes who has a big debt, right, with a debtor, owes a large sum, and the creditor comes to him and says, okay, if you pay me 1% of what you owe right now, I will forgive everything that you owe me. But if you can't pay me right now, then I will come back later. I will hunt you down until you have paid every single penny. And then he asks, well, if we were given that opportunity in life, wouldn't we be happy that the creditor gave us that opportunity? Wouldn't we be grateful for that opportunity to pay it, a little, just a small portion of what the debt really was, and so he suggests that we ought to start thinking of this life, right? This material life, this version of ourselves, this incarnation, as as a really small point in infinity, or in eternity. I think he's as little dots inside of eternity, our lives in this world. And once we start understanding that nothing, that no debts that I incur today will go unpaid, whether it's later in this life, whether it's in another life. When I start to understand the spiritual life, that we're not here for one term, we're not here for 60 years, 70 years, 100 years. We're here this time around. We'll be back. We have our soul, our spirit survives, and lives on. And when we understand that that this is just a small dot inside of eternity, we can account for it better, and we can look at it as this opportunity to pay 1% or to pay a small fee, right? He says, the pain of this world is the payment for past debts which have been incurred, patiently supported here on earth. These pains will save centuries of future suffering. One should be happy that God is reducing the debt by permitting payment now, thereby guaranteeing a tranquil future. And so, when we look, before we got to this, I talked about forgetfulness of the past, and how, upon reincarnating, we're not bringing our memories of past lives as a way to actually make it easier for us to work with each other and deal with some of the spirits that have been problematic in our past lives. Sometimes our brothers in our family, sometimes our brothers in our spiritist center, and sometimes both. And so by having forgotten this past and having been put into this incarnation with this chance of again redeeming ourselves and working with each other and working through our issues and becoming better versions of ourselves and better spiritual beings, understanding the spiritual life allows us to understand and be more resigned with our fate or our position under God, under God's will, and what is our direction in this world, what is our purpose in this world. And so, he points out this idea that as we enter this life, we have this opportunity to kill a lot of debts fairly quickly. Unfortunately, as he points out, sometimes you start paying your bill, and then you start taking out a little more of a loan, right? So it's like that credit card that you never finish paying. You can get a loan and say, okay, my loan I'm going to pay $400 a month, and then in 6 years I own the car or whatever, right? But a credit card is different, right? You can take out this much, and you can pay all of everything that you took this month, or you can pay the minimum and so on, and then you go paying the minimum, and that thing lives on forever, right? So that's kind of, unfortunately, the image. And the beauty of the beauty of Kardec is that as you read these, sometimes there's some insights here that I believe are hard to imagine were real problems back in the 1800s for most of the people, right? I mean, credit cards these days are so easy to get, and it's a problem that anybody can have. But he's talking in the same terms, and he's obviously addressing people who could actually even be involved in this, and have this sort of experience in their lives. But he's got some insights that are amazing. Later on there's another one that we'll get to it. But in any case, so this idea of continuously adding to the debt while you're paying, being really one of the major problems that we have in our lives, because we can't, we not only can we not just accept our suffering and learn from that, and we don't have to feel the most pain, right? I mean, obviously there's medicine today. It's not the same as 100 years ago, 150 years ago, or 1,000 years ago. God has given us the tools and the intelligence and so on to develop ways to be more comfortable through pain, so that we have more time in our lives to work through different sorts of issues today than the 400 years ago or 200 years ago even. So the world evolves, and our experiences change, of course, but one thing that ends up happening is, how much debt are we adding to that account at every turn in our lives, right? So so he invites us to again think of our spiritual life, our how our lives didn't start with our birth in this life. It didn't start with our mom. It won't end when we die. It's going to continue. It will carry on, and when we look at that at eternity, and we think of this life as just as nothing but a dot of in eternity, then we can start thinking of maybe this is the time that I will take that opportunity to pay down the debt at 1% and not incur more debt, right? Not because that's the problem, right? So he talks about, it says here, so, he says, man can soften or increase the bitterness of his trials according to the manner in which he regards earthly life. His suffering will be all the more depending on how long he imagines it to be. Now, this is before Einstein, before, we started thinking if time is something relative, right? He's already saying here, the suffering, one's suffering, right, man's suffering, his suffering will be all the more depending on how long he imagines it to be, how long I imagine my suffering to be, right? I remember, sometimes when I run with my friend, I have a friend who I like to, who we meet up 3 or 4 times a week to run, and it's always fun when sometimes there are days that you're just so tired, even in the beginning of running or any exercise, of course, and you start thinking about something else, and you get worked up, or you as you're running, if all you're thinking is, how much longer is this going to take? How much, and you look down and you're like, I can't even see where we're supposed to get to. There's still another 2 miles. And, if that's all you're thinking about, that thing takes forever. Those 20 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour that you do feel like it's been the entire day, right? But sometimes, you start in the morning and, you start running, and while you can still talk, you're talking something interesting, and, you're thinking about what you're going to do that day, or what you did the day before, or how you have a great idea for something, or your mind is working on something else while you're running, and then all of a sudden you're like, I'm really tired, but this is done. It didn't take forever, right? And so the way that we treat time, just in the way that we're thinking about it, just the way that we deal with our pains, and this, in this, for example, I'm talking about just physical pain, the physical pain of exercising. If that's what I'm thinking about, that 2 miles, 3 miles, however long I run that day, seems like it takes forever. And really, we get to half and it's like, wow, I need to do this again. We usually run in a straight line and then we come back, right? So the more you keep running out, the more you have to come back. And you're like, should we just stop and turn around because this is going to keep going? And if that's all you're thinking about, it's really painful. And sometimes it's just hard to get out of that mindset, right? It's hard to stop thinking about it that way. But this is the same with any pain that we have, any suffering that we have. If something, I like the example of the mothers who have opened up groups for after their children have died for shootings or whatever reason, cancer and so on, if all they did was think about how that hurt and, just think about their children all the time and not make anything productive out of that. I mean, imagine how long and suffering a life that must be if that's all you're thinking about. And so, when you look at these examples, these are true examples of how we should deal with with all of the ailments, all of the afflictions that we get to go through in our lives. So when he says, so as he says here, I said, the how long he imagines it to be as being, a big part of how long and how bad that suffering is. I mean, we can see it in our day-to-day lives, and there are studies that show this, right? That time is so much more in your mind than you can imagine. And so he says, those who can see life through a spiritual prism, understand that bodily existence at a glance. They see that life is but a point in eternity, as I had said before. They comprehend the shortness of its duration and recognize that this painful moment will soon pass. And it's basically this too shall pass, right? It's this idea that the more we think of our suffering, the more we are devoted to thinking about that, the longer that's going to be, and the least productive we're going to be. So, he says here, the result of looking at life in a spiritual way is a diminishing importance of all the worldly things. Man feels himself compelled to moderate his desires and content himself with his position without envying others. So we had talked about envy before. And, once we start taking a serious look at our lives here as this moment in our eternity, in this short moment, great moment, beautiful moment in our eternity, of course, we can take a step back and be a little more accepting or a little more resigned into God's will, into God's justice, God's natural laws, and what He has for us, right? And we, once we start understanding life that way as a spiritual life, we really dial down, right? We moderate, we become more content with what we have or what we're going through without envying others, because we've learned that, others also go through these things. And so what's the point of us trying to put ourselves in their position? But not only that, and this was the point that I said, it's like, this is 1850s, right? He's saying from these attitudes, from learning, from taking this opportunity and learning moderation, and being content with what God has given us, not in a way of being accommodated and just, stagnated into just accepting everything and being done with it and not doing anything about it. On the contrary, doing something to suffer less. But he says, from these attitudes comes calmness and resignation, right? And they say, and then he says, calmness and resignation that are so useful to bodily health, to the health of our bodies, our material life, as well as to our soul. So, in the 1850s, he's already, we certainly understand these days how stress can affect our lives in such a negative way. In the 1850s, he was already, talking about this, how being, more understanding of our own situation, and not being stagnated, but accepting who we are, where we are, and working with that, and turning that into something positive, like the example of that I mentioned a couple of times of the moms that have lost their children. That way we can learn to grow from this pain, to grow from this suffering. How Teixeira says, if it were not for resignation, if it were not for this attitude, for what we can learn from this, we would enter a state of desolation and despair, because we would not understand. Because if we don't understand why we suffer, if we keep thinking, why is God giving me all of this? Why does this only happen to me? Why? And why we suffer twice. We suffer once because we're suffering, and then we suffer because we lose the hope that God is there for us. Instead of understanding, God's love and God's justice for us and the purpose that He has for us, on the contrary, we just suffer twice. We suffer through the pain, the original pain, and our initial affliction, and we suffer, just for ignorance, for not seeing, and losing touch with God, who's so important in our lives, so important in the hope of how we go on through this life and through our spiritual life. So, understanding that sometimes there is suffering and sometimes there's crying, and, understanding that that it's not always the end of the world, and that there's a purpose, and that we can learn from that, and we can take some positive lessons from it. And so I wanted to finish. I mentioned the last chapter of the book, the chapter on a collection of Spiritist prayers, and there's a section called "An Act of Submission and Resignation." Again, where Kardec kind of gives us some examples of prayers that we could, in different situations in our lives, raise our thoughts to God and to the good spirits and pray. And I thought this one was particularly, a nice way to finish our study. He prefaces it by discussing a little bit of afflictions again, and he points back to chapter 5, and he says, in general, we can only see the evil that's present in our afflictions. We do not see the favorable consequences they may have later on. Goodness is frequently the outcome of a past evil, just as the cure for an illness results from the painful methods used to obtain it. Sometimes you need to take a needle to your body, and that's painful, but that will fix, it will, kill the bacteria that might be killing you, or might be making you ill. So, sometimes pain is just a means of achieving something better, is kind of the point that he's trying to make here. And so he offers us item 31 in chapter 28, this really short prayer, but I thought it was very, very well thought. And, if we feel like we are suffering a little much sometimes, this might be one way to say it. To say, to address God or to address the spirits. Dear Lord, your justice is supreme. Therefore, all suffering in this world must have a just cause and be of use. I accept the affliction which I am undergoing, or which I have suffered, as an atonement for my past errors, and as a test for the future. Good spirits who protect me, give me the necessary strength to support this without complaining. Help me to look at it as a providential warning. May it enrich my experience, reduce my pride, diminish my ambition, my stupid vanity and selfishness. In short, may it contribute to my progress. So be it. Thank you very much. I hope this was a good, this raised a few good things for us to think about. And, many blessings to all of us.
Are we going to have the passes tonight or no? We? Muito bem. Então, so, sorry. Yeah. So, I'd like to thank Hendrick for his explanation of motives of resignation. And Nancy for coming up here in short notice to do the message. Thank Chris for opening this center. Yeah, and being here in support for all of us and all the other ones that I can't see, but I know that they are here. And hopefully this message, which is being recorded, can reach other people on the internet. Just as a reminder, we are doing our live transmission of all the topics, all our meetings on Saturdays. Every Saturday we have this live. Our meeting here goes live on YouTube, and every Saturday starts at 7, and when it ends, it ends. Of course, it can be watched anywhere in the world, and we are not doing this every Monday, but every Monday that has an English meeting, these meetings are being recorded and being transmitted live. So anyone with online access can watch it live, can even, if they know how to, can even send a message or so on and record something. So tonight it was obviously being recorded and transmitted. So we have a few announcements. This week there's a special presentation on Saturday by this woman called Celia Diniz. She will be here at Continue talking about the pain of suffering, the pain of loss and spiritism, and she will talk about this is really the topic, how to be resigned, or understand, or have a better understanding, and how to go over and move over from those feelings of loss that we all have throughout our lives. And she is a writer, she is a speaker, she is spiritist, and her story was told in a movie called The Mothers of Chico Xavier. It's one of the stories that's in that specific movie, and she will be here with us to share her insights and share her ideas in connection with spiritism, with this huge pain of when we get separated from the ones that we love. She will be here tonight on Saturday night, but in the morning she will also be at the Allan Kardec Spiritist Society of Massachusetts in Malden. So she will be there in the morning giving a talk there too, and she will come here at night. At that same night, which is this next Saturday on the 19th, we will be celebrating Mother's Day here at Continue. We waited to do our Mother's Day celebration when she was here, so we are waiting for her, and we will have a special dinner night and so on. And on Sunday, we will have our yard sale. So if you guys have anything that you don't want anymore, that you want to bring to be sold, and all the profits will come to the center to help pay our bills and our rent and everything that we use every month. So we will be here from 9 to 3 p.m. So if you want to bring anything, or if you want to come as well to help set up the booth outside, to help with prices, to come for 1 or 2 hours just to be there. Sometimes there's a lot of people, so we need people, looking around and see if everything's okay, helping the customers or people that stop by. That we put signs on the road, on the streets. So there's a lot of small things that if we have a few more people, it's always helpful to have. So this is all happening this weekend, Saturday and Sunday. Next week we will have another special guest, which was just we just finished talking to Carlos from G2. He is coming. He is coming just for a weekend, just for the Saturday night, and for the Sunday morning. He's also a Brazilian guy. He's coming from Brazil, and he's stopping by. And he will talk about depression and spiritism. So that will be the Saturday after this one. And then after that, we will have Jorespi, which is going to be our 10th year of Jorespi. We're already, the program is already done. We just sent the program to all the speakers, the titles of the topics, and we're going to have 9 different speakers the whole month. We're going to receive Daniel Assisi again. We're going to receive Luis Lima from Florida. We're going to receive Eduardo Guimarães coming from Brazil. We're going to receive Adriano Babo from New York and Deborah from New Jersey. And Flavio will come on Monday. Rosie will come on another Monday. Monica will come on another Monday. And Maria Cristina will come on another Monday. So we're going to have like 9 different people coming here to talk to us about the topic this year is cycles, which celebrates 150 years of the book, The Genesis by Allan Kardec. And then we finished this cycle of going through all the books of the Spiritist codification. Last year we did 106 years of the Spirit's book. Then we did 150 years of the Heaven and Hell. Then we did 150 years of the Gospel according to Spiritism and of the Medium's book. And this year, the last book of this series, Genesis. And it's going to be hopefully a very good and instructive Jorespi, again, closing this cycle of, it's the 10th Jorespi. It's 10 years doing this event. And so hopefully you can all help. You'll be receiving the topics, the ones who are going to have to read, like Nancy did tonight. We're going to have small talks, small inspirational messages here, and we're going to change the environment as we always do. And so June will be a very good month once again. I forgot. I think his first name is Eduardo, but I can't remember his last name right now. I have it on my cell phone, but since I didn't know him prior, I still didn't get used to remembering his name. But I'll tell you right after we finish here. I'll let you know. And I think that's it for. Well, let's remind everyone of the gospel at home, or the God at home. Every week, one night a week or one day a week, we gather together with our family, read a message, invite Jesus to our home, the good spirit, so that we can keep up with our environment, our spiritual environment, as good as we have in churches, in the Spiritist Center, in the temples, so that we keep our a clean spiritual environment in our house. And then by inviting these spirits, we can also help our neighborhood and everybody that's surrounding our humble abode, as someone would say, or our humble house, our humble home. And with that, I think we can finish our meeting, and I guess I'm just gonna say a prayer, and if you can, uh, yeah. Oh no, you can go there and then do the blessing of the water, and after they do it, we will finish. So thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.